You are Locked On Bulls Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Chicago on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Bulls Postcast here on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. My name is Joe George. Find me on Twitter at Joe George Radio. Reminder, we're here after every single Bulls game the rest of the season. Starting with the Cubs season, we'll be moving these postcast shows to the Locked On Cubs channel. But for tonight, we're talking Chicago Bulls basketball. The Bulls win 114-109 over the Miami Heat. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. A night where the Bulls are down 17, they're down 10, they're down 11. They're atrocious from the three-point line. Again, they have not been great these last couple days. They're now 2-0 on this road trip. They've got a lot of tough games coming up this season. They continue to cement themselves as the 10 seed, in that last spot in the play-in tournament. I've been saying this for like a week now. It feels like they're going to be that last play-in team in. But tonight's game was crazy because they were just terrible from the three-point line. And every time they were down by 10 or 11 or 17, they'd get this thing back down to 2 points, to 5 points, to 6 points. Like, they'd be right back in this game, and they kept reverting back to these terrible habits throughout the game, where as soon as they get this game close, they'd start ripping threes. And the threes were making it close because they weren't hitting any of them. They were terrible for basically this entire game, really from start to finish, from the three-point line. So they would get close by attacking the paint, by getting to the free throw line, by playing good defense, and they'd start ripping threes, and all of a sudden the Miami Heat would just get a big lead again. And finally, they just stopped. Finally, something clicked with Billy Donovan's players, and they just stopped shooting threes as they were finally making this comeback push. And really, and we're going to get into it, we're going to go to him right away. We're going to start the show right off with our player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
Locked On Player of the Game. Option 1, Josh Giddey. Triple-double, hits the three to make it a 4-point game. I think the player of the game today is Tre Jones. He's the player of the fourth quarter, at least, because you saw what happened. He had 2 points coming into the quarter. He scores 13+, and he has this stretch, which is absolutely phenomenal. He goes in for a layup. He misses it. He gets his own rebound. The smallest guy in the court is surrounded by 2 to 3, I think it was 3 Miami Heat players. He puts the ball back up. He ties the game. Then Josh Giddey gets the block on a Miami Heat player as he's trailing the play. Tre Jones gets the ball back. He goes down there. He ties it. Then Tre Jones gets the steal and the bucket to make it 107-105. And that right there felt like that's when the Bulls were going to win this game because of that stretch within a handful of possessions. Some of those were back-to-back, but within a handful of possessions, all from Tre Jones. He has been, him, Zach Collins, and Kevin Huerter. I know it wasn't the Bulls' intention to keep these guys on their roster, but Zach Collins and Tre Jones specifically, I've really enjoyed watching play. Kevin Huerter's a bit hit or miss. It feels like tonight, he was not good from the three-point line, and that's really what he's best at. But Tre Jones, with Io being out, has filled that role so nicely. And Zach Collins, at one point, he had as many threes as the rest of the team. The Bulls started, he had 4 threes. He tied a career high. The Bulls were 4 for 18 after he was 4 for 6 himself. So Zach Collins was hitting threes left and right, but the rest of the team was terrible. So that stretch for me, though, right there from Tre Jones, that to me makes him the player of this game because he really is that's the moment where the Bulls won the basketball game. And I guess technically we'll just roll it right into.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
That's the turning point of the game, too. We'll bundle them together in this segment right here. That's the turning point of the game, is that Tre Jones stretch. And, of course, then you have, after Tre Jones gets the steal in the bucket to make it 107-105, Kobe White goes to the lane. He gets the really tough and one. And then to make it 113-109, Josh Giddey hits his 300th career three to make it 113-109. A night where he was, there's the one he called for in the corner where he missed that three as well. But Josh Giddey, he really collectively was probably the player of the game, honestly. But it's just that stretch from Tre Jones that was so important. And Josh Giddey's third triple-double. This stat kind of blew my mind just hearing them talk about this on the broadcast. The first Chicago Bulls player to ever have a triple-double against the Miami Heat was Josh Giddey. But he ends up with 26 points, 12 assists, 10 rebounds. That one block we mentioned when he was trailing the Miami Heat coming down the court. He just continues to have really good all-around success. This last 7-8 game stretch, we're seeing Giddey kind of come into his own of why you make this trade. I can at least see the vision now. For a while, I didn't get it. I didn't see it. He wasn't closing basketball games. But this stretch from Giddey, including tonight, is really where I'm like, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense to why when he hits restricted free agency and someone offers him $30 million, I kind of get the idea now of why the Bulls are going to match that. Because now we're seeing him play in clutch moments without Lonzo out there, without Ayo, without Levine, with him being traded, without Vooch. Josh Giddey's being kind of thrust into this role of being out there for closing minutes. And hopefully that's just like with Modest Buzelis being put in the starting lineup. I hope that just stays. Like no matter how the rest of the season plays out, even if they go on this incredibly difficult road stretch and they just totally fall apart and I'm proven wrong and they do fall out of the play-in tournament, which is fine. Not a big deal if that happens. But I just want to see Josh Giddey continue to close these basketball games because it's my biggest question about just like what his role is on this team in the future. And he did a really good job just filling it out for the Bulls tonight everywhere. He really just brings so much energy to this team. And again, like when this team is shooting so terribly from three, Josh Giddey is typically the guy who kind of leads the change of pace for that. Where we saw multiple times tonight when the Bulls are bricking threes left and right, he's the one that's driving to the lane, trying to get into contact, trying to find a way to get to the hoop. And then finally, like Kobe White and everyone just caught on. So Kobe White, he had a bad first half, obviously much better in the second half. Coming after a 44-point game, this is really the Jekyll and Hyde of Kobe White. He goes 0 for 8 himself from the three-point line. Kevin Huerter was 1 for 9. Jalen Smith was 1 for 6. Buzelis was 1 for 5. So you just had a couple guys that kept ripping shots that were just stinking it up. And that's what most of those guys, that's really all they do. Huerter, Jalen Smith, really, that's all he does. 6 of his 9 shots were from the three-point line. Huerter, it's 9 of his 13. Kobe White was half his shots. So when those guys are like predominantly three-point shooters and they're all shooting this terribly, it's kind of a miracle to win a basketball game like this. And I know the Miami Heat don't have Jimmy Butler, and we saw the return of Andrew Wiggins tonight, who was a huge problem for the Bulls in the first half. I mean, he was really in the first quarter, he was really getting anything he wanted to against the Bulls. The thing about the Heat is we just all know as basketball fans, like, it doesn't really matter who's on their roster. Like, since Eric Spoelstra took over, post LeBron and D-Wade and Bosh, like, it doesn't matter who's been on the Heat. They're an ultra-competitive basketball team, so even though the name brand guys are not there, we saw Bam Adebayo have a really good night. And really, the reality of the Heat is, to what we saw with the Kobe White struggles, is, well, Billy Donovan was mostly outcoached in this game. And we saw Bam Adebayo, really being all over Kobe White defensively for most of this game, and they were trapping Kobe White. Like, they knew going into this game, their number one plan, it was so clear as day watching on TV, it was to attack Kobe White whenever they could, as often as they could, and just make his life miserable. And that was going to be the reason why they thought they were going to win this game. And until Kobe White picked it up in the second half after only having 4 in the first half, it looked like the Heat were going to, pretty easily get this when they were up 17, pretty early on in this game. All right, let's talk more about just the game overall. A couple other little nuggets in there, but we got to talk more about this three-point shooting stuff because it's driving me nuts. So I just want to talk a little bit more in the next segment, and we'll check in here on the play-in standings because the lead continues to grow, and we'll take a look at where the Bulls still stand at the moment after winning another basketball game in the Tankathon and Lottery standings. We'll do that next year on the Locked On Bulls postcast on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. The team I'll be looking at this year in the tournament, again, even though they struggle offensively, I will be looking at the University of Houston Cougars. I feel like this finally might be their year with LJ Cryer in the way that he's been playing in Auburn now, too, after losing to Alabama today. We got to keep an eye on them and see what they got the rest of the year. And, of course, the guy that, well, all Bulls fans will be watching in March Madness and praying for the lottery balls to fall their way. Cooper Flag with Duke as well. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Today's show is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So the Bulls in this game continued their recent trend, besides when Kobe White's dropping 44, of not being able to buy a bucket from the three-point line. And that's just really what is the reason why they could not close this gap really there until the fourth quarter. We're like, the Bulls outscored the Heat 36-20 in the fourth. Like that's really what it comes down to as well. It's the Heat who have been shooting the ball all night. They finally stopped doing that. And the Bulls played good defense. Like you think back to that stuff we were going over there in the fourth quarter. There's a Josh Giddey block. There's a Tre Jones steal. Like there's just a bunch of good defensive moments from the Bulls in the fourth quarter that led to a lot of it, but really the end of it was they stopped shooting threes in the fourth quarter. The Bulls go 11 of 42, 26% from the three-point line. It's just not what's frustrating about it still, and why it just drives me nuts is I understand this is the philosophy that they want to go with this season, that the Bulls felt like playing with pace, shooting threes was going to be the thing that got them closer to being above average in the NBA. Obviously, it's not worked that way. They're 12 games now below 500? I think it is that officially. Yeah, 12 games. They're 26-38 now. So you're going to make the play-in tournament, but you're a below 500 team significantly. You have the 8th best odds to get the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. And this style of basketball just hasn't worked. It's just not working on a day-in and day-out basis. And it's why I don't understand why there hasn't been a bigger picture pivot from the players, the coaching staff, specifically in this game. Again, where you're taking a 10-point deficit and you're cutting it down to 2 points. And instead of doing what's working for you, you just regress to shooting threes. And then all of a sudden, you're down 11 points. And you have to come back again and again and again. And finally, they do overcome it. But it's just the one part of the Bulls that I don't quite get why there hasn't just been that adjustment at any point of the season. We just don't see it. And I think it's so clear, too. They're just a better basketball team attacking the hoop. You think about the guys that are on this roster and the guys who were on this roster. Zach LaVine was good at attacking the rim. He could go off any given night from the three-point line, but he was good attacking the rim. Kobe White is a perfect example. 0 for 8 in this game. Terrible in the first half. Scores almost all of his points in the second half. When he stops taking as many threes, he's 0 for 8. And yes, he's coming off a 44-point game, so he's a heat check guy. And we've seen him now. The 2 games before this, he was on fire from 3. So I get why he's going to take him. But even then, when you're missing this many, I don't get why they don't just stop. Just stop shooting the threes. Keep doing what's working. Because that's the thing. It's not like the Bulls are stop shooting three. It's not like they keep shooting threes and they're missing them, and they're also missing all their layups, and they're also ineffective in the mid range, and they're also ineffective in the post. They're not. They're good in the post. They're good in the paint. Specifically, it feels like on nights like this where they just can't buy a bucket from 3. So I don't quite understand, why that is. We did see it took a while for the Bulls to it was deep into the second quarter before the Bulls even got their first offensive rebound of the game. And they did end up with 5 on the day. So didn't have a lot of second chance opportunities themselves. The Miami Heat only had 7 offensive rebounds, so it's not like you were beat up on the boards in a big way. But you are missing, that's one thing where Zach Collins has also been a little bit hit or miss. We saw in the previous game where he has 7 rebounds in the first quarter and 5 of them were offensive. But he seemed to play a little more timid defensively, feels like after fouling out the other night, but he was good from the 3-point line himself. He's really the only guy I would say like you look at from the starters and be like, yeah, he was good. Josh Giddey was 3 for 4, so I guess there's two guys. But Giddey goes 3 for 4. Zach Collins goes 4 for 6 from the 3-point line. And Zach Collins, another double-double. This is his fourth double-double. Now as a member of the Bulls, 18 points, 15 rebounds. So he's all over the glass. And they just got to find a way to keep playing him. Like, no matter what happens when Vooch comes back, like, Zach Collins is a guy that should be part of this rotation for the rest of the season, at least in some capacity, because I just think the Bulls are, selfishly, I think they're more fun watching Zach Collins at center than Vooch, just because I think I've said this before, been there, done that with Vooch, over it, should have been traded at the deadline. He'll be back at some point, it looks like, after this trip to Florida, so maybe we'll see him back early next week, even maybe as soon as Monday versus the Pacers. But just Zach Collins, the ball seems that him and Tre Jones, along with the rest of the core guys that are out there, they just seem to move better up and down the court without Vooch kind of slowing them down in a way. So I hope that doesn't change. I hope that when Vooch comes back, we still see significant Zach Collins minutes the rest of the year. And frankly, like, I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world to say Vooch is just out for the season. I know they're not going to do it, but I wouldn't be hating if they decide to sit Vooch for the rest of the year. All right, let's get to our final benchmark here of the show. What are you going to be talking about after this game versus the Heat?
This is what you'll be talking about.
What you'll be talking about, I think it's Coby White. I think it's the Jekyll and Hyde performance. 44 points, followed up by 0 for 8 from the 3-point line. 4 points in the first half. Does end up with 21 on the night. Goes 9 for 9 from the free throw line. So when he starts attacking, gets a couple and ones in the second half, like, that is, again, where we see the absolute game changer that becomes Coby White in this game. But I think that's the biggest thing from this game from, like, a fan perspective is the highs of a 44-point night to the lows of watching him brick threes one after another. You know, it's funny, I was listening to this clip from the score, I can't remember, I think it was Dennis. I think it was the producer, just kind of poo-pooing the Coby White night. And I get it. Like, what does it really mean? It's just fun. Like, that's what the Bulls have been. They've been entertaining this year at times. It's not always been a great product, but nights like tonight, like the Cardiac Bulls are a real thing. This now checks the boxes of 20-point comeback, 2 20-point comebacks, a 19-point comeback, an 18-point comeback, and a 17-point comeback, because that's what they were down in this game. So the Bulls win 114-109 over the Miami Heat. So if you wanted them to, plummet out of the play-in position, not happening. Currently, as we do this show, they are now 4 games up on the Philadelphia 76ers. They are 4.5 games up on... 4.5 games up on the Brooklyn Nets, was making sure my math was there. And then the Toronto Raptors, all of a sudden, are like the next closest team. You're 5 games up on them. So being 4 games up on the 76ers, a team that has shut down Joel Embiid and best players like Paul George are getting booed at a WWE SmackDown event, which was hilarious, in Philadelphia. That's kind of where the Bulls are at this season. Like, they continue to be just kind of locked into that 10 spot. Their play-in standings hasn't really changed. They're a game and a half up on the San Antonio Spurs, so still a little distance between them and San Antonio, full 2 games up on Portland. So kind of got to keep an eye on that. That is where the Bulls, the way they're playing, it's starting to become a little bit more clear. If you got something we got to keep an eye on in terms of like falling in the lottery as well. Because yes, they might be the 10 seed, but I think there is possible to be the 10 seed and also keep the 8th best odds, and that's really what the Bulls probably realistically will end up being. We've been doing this at the end of each show too. We've been hitting that sim lottery on Tankathon. Last time we did it, the Bulls ended up with the 8th pick. So we hit sim lottery, and they dropped down to the 9th pick this time, which would disappoint all of us. A one and done in the play-in and a 9th pick in the lottery would be a bummer. All right, that will do it for us. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Make sure you go over to the Locked On Bulls YouTube channel, the Locked On Bulls audio channel, Spotify, Apple. Hit that subscribe button. The audio for this show does drop there in the Locked On Bulls audio feed in Apple and Spotify. So if you ever missed a show or don't want to watch on video, like, that's available for you as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for checking us out. My name is Joe George. Talk to you on Monday night after they play the Pacers. Thanks for watching.